Hello, it's me, Justin Hancock. I'm here today to read my book to you. Can we talk about consent? A book about freedom, choices, and agreement. As you can see, written by me, Justin Hancock, but illustrated amazingly by the amazing illustrator Fuschia Macaree. And you can see these illustrations here. So that's why I've got the camera this way around. I won't be showing you my face because I want to show you the book. And you can see my face here. Here's my face. There's Fuchsia's face. Hello, both of us. Yes, aren't we great? Yes, we both are. And it's published by Francis Lincoln Books, which is an imprint of Quarto Kids. Um, and also, there are lots of foreign editions. So there's it's big in Italy, but there's like Korean, Japanese, Hungarian, Turkish, Greek, and French and French Canadian, which are published in under a different kind of series. That's why they look like that. It's big in Italy. Hello, any Italian fans? So there'll be details about where you can find all of those at the link in the description for this video. And yeah, so you might see this down in the bottom right-hand corner. If you don't know about me, I also run Bish, which is one of the world's leading sex and relationships education websites. A Guide to Sex, Love and You. You know how a website works. You just kind of go to it and you click on it, and there's lots of interesting information and things for you to find out about. So that's bishuk.com, or if you just Google Bish, you will usually find me. All right, so should we start? So can we talk about consent? A book about freedom, choices, and agreement. Welcome to this book about consent. I'm Justin, and I've been teaching and writing about consent for many, many years in my job as a sex and relationships educator. I've worked on consent with thousands of young people in school workshops and have written advice online that millions of young people have read. That's at Bish. Together, we've tackled some really interesting and important questions related to consent, like how do I ask someone what they want without it being awkward? What if I don't know what I want? I feel like I have to please other people all the time. Do I? I hope that this book will help your thinking about consent and will make it easier for you to chat to other people about it. Although some of this book is about sex, it's not a sex book. That's because consent isn't just about sex. Consent is a part of our everyday lives, and I think it's something we should all be thinking about a bit more deeply. Think about the choices you've made for yourself so far today. What you've eaten, drank, worn, watched, or read, were they your choices? Will you be watching TV later with someone? And if so, how will you decide what to watch? Has anyone asked you if you wanted to do something today? Did you respond with a yes or a no, or something else? Did you even really know what you wanted? Have you greeted anyone today with a hug, a handshake, or a fist bump? Was that what either of you really wanted? Did you read a news story today where people had their freedom restricted because of racism, sexism, classism, or just violence generally? It's a complicated topic. It's more than just asking or saying yes or no. It's about the small stuff, like what chocolate bar you want to buy, and the really, really big stuff, like your relationships. It's about how you feel about yourself, how you connect with others, and how you get to be part of consent in the world. And yes, some of it is about sex, but I'll let you know when we get to that bit. So, how are you feeling about turning the page? Well, I'm feeling quite positive actually, Justin. Okay, let's turn the page then. All right, here we go. What is consent? On the one hand, consent is really simple. It's wrong for people to make us do something that we don't want to do. It's also wrong for us to make someone do something that they don't want to do. But we should all be aiming for a much higher standard when we think about consent. Lots of people think that consent is about asking someone else if they want to do something, asking for a yes or no answer. You know, like when people do dramatic romantic marriage proposals in public. Is someone really making a free choice if their only possible responses are yes or no? What if someone doesn't know how to respond but feels under pressure to say something? How can someone say no if they worry about hurting the other person's feelings? What if someone doesn't say yes or no at all? What if they fear the other person will break up with them if they say no? As you can see, consent isn't just about asking. We're going to take a closer look at consent. By thinking about it more deeply, we can start to understand how we can be more consensual with ourselves and each other in real life. So, what exactly is consent? Well, the legal definition of consent in the UK is a person consents if they agree by choice and has the freedom and capacity to make that choice. Consent is about freedom, choices, and agreement. So it's actually a very big topic and more complicated than just a yes or a no. Although it's important to remember that a no is always a no, and the absence of a no does not mean a yes. We'll start by looking at our own relationships with consent. We'll learn about how to find out about what we need, how to ask for what we want, even when it feels like there are so many rules we should be following. We'll be thinking about our own decision-making power and why that's so important. We'll explore how we can choose what we want, as well as meeting other people's needs. Then we'll look at consent in the world. We'll cover how to ask people what they want in a consensual way, understand what a no sounds like even when someone doesn't say it, and learn how to make our interactions more consensual. Look at the many different ways that we might communicate with each other and why talking about talking is so important. We'll think about how things we are taught about ourselves in the wider world can make consent more difficult. Consent should be happening all day, every day. We'll look at how it's easier for some people to choose than others, and why that has a lot to do with who we are, our politics, our identities, and our rights. Consent is about choosing something to eat, what TV show or film we want to watch, what game we're going to play, how we're going to greet each other, and also about sex. By the end of this book, you'll be able to take more consent into the world for yourself and the people around you. But some of it is about pizza. I just really like pizza. Well, so I hope you'll enjoy this and we'll learn something from it. But first of all, do you want to keep reading? How are you feeling about this book so far? Do you want to carry on? Feel free to put it down or back on the shelf if you're not feeling comfortable. I'm not going to be offended, okay? Honestly, I won't. Really, it's fine. Let's think of this as a scale. So from -10, a book you want to drop the book, run away, and never hear about it again. 0 is like, meh, I could go either way. And +10, you want to read and memorize every single word. Where are you on that scale right now? You don't have to decide now. You can take your time. You could put the book down for a bit and have a think about it. Or you could have a flick through and see if it's something you want to read. Maybe you'll get more into it or less into it. Think about how engaged you are as you read it, and remember, you can always put it down if you need to. If you feel like you have to read it because someone bought it for you, or as a present, or an adult says you should read it, then maybe, if you want to, show them this bit. You do not have to read this book, okay? Sorry about the caps there. I just really wanted to make a point. Okay, so for all the readers who would like to turn the next page, are you ready? I promise it's not the sex bit. I really will tell you when we get to that. Consent and you. The first bit of the book is all about you. Hi. Why are we starting with you? Well, as I said, consent is about making choices and having the freedom to make choices. So it makes sense to start with you because it's your life. These are your choices. This means thinking about what you want or what you need from a choice. It's not always easy to work out what we want from a choice. It's the kind of thing that we get better at with practice. The more we think about what we want, the easier it is to make good choices for us. I went for a pizza. This is where it's complex because I have to turn the book around. Okay. When I was asked to write this book, I decided to go for a celebratory pizza. I also thought that talking about pizza would be a good starting point for about consent. So this next bit is going to be about pizza a lot. At this point, I should say if pizza isn't your thing, that's okay. You can take this example and apply it to anything, like a chocolate bar, a can of fizzy drink, what to watch on TV, or a game you might want to play with someone or by yourself, I mean. The pizza here is an analogy. Anyway, back to pizza. At my local pizza place, they have a menu of 5 things. It's one of those places where they don't give you much choice because for a pizza to be a real authentic pizza, it can only be made from a few ingredients. For example, they wouldn't let you have pineapple on your pizza because that's not real pizza. This idea of real pizza or proper pizza means I have less choice. It's a should story, and that will keep coming up in this book. A should story is told to us to make us do what is considered normal, even if it's not harmful to do otherwise. Other examples of should stories are you must wear matching socks, or you can't eat sweet things before savory, or when you're listening to music in your earbuds, you shouldn't lip sync along in public. Choosing my pizza, I questioned the situation I was in. Was I making a choice for me, or was I just following a should story just to try and fit in? I was also wearing matching socks and didn't have dessert first. This pressure to fit in really reduces our choices in life. Making choices based on other people's opinions isn't really consent at all. On the menu, two of the choices were too boring for me, tomato or cheese and tomato, and another had mushrooms on, I'm allergic. So I could just choose between two pizzas, anchovy or salami. If I was a vegetarian, I would have had the choice of three pizzas, and two of them quite dull. If I was a vegan, I would only have been able to choose one very boring pizza. When there's only one thing we can eat at a pizza place, our choice becomes, do you want to eat or do you not want to eat? That's not a lot of choice at all. In fact, it's barely a choice. If consent is about choices and freedom, then it's more than just avoiding something we don't want. Not much choice means not much or no consent at all. You might be able to think of other examples like this in your life. What if someone said you can watch TV, but you can only watch the same thing over and over again? Or that you can play football, but only if you're playing goal? Or that you can get your hair dyed, but it has to be blue, for example? We need more than one option so that we can really have the freedom to choose. So these examples don't really allow much room for real consent. Infinity Pizza. If I were to open up a pizza place that was all about consent and loads of choices, I'd call it Infinity Pizza. And I'd do things differently. I'd have regular wheat base, but also gluten-free bases for my gluten intolerant friends. These two different bases could be made in several different styles, thin and crispy, thick and doughy, or somewhere in between. And I'd different styles like Italian ones, so Neapolitan, Roman, Sicilian, or American, so Chicago, deep dish, New York, Detroit, Hawaiian. I'd have a Turkish pizza called pide, which is thin and crispy, and Ethiopian pizzas. I'd have a Flammkuchen. There'd be roti pizzas and even Japanese pizza bases. There would be rectangular or round. You can't have triangles though. No, sorry, no, but I draw the line at triangles. I'd also have all the toppings you'd expect at a pizza place: cheese, pepperoni, onions, olives, aubergines, mushrooms, pineapple. But then I'd have other things like Brussels sprouts, strawberries. I'd have different sauces. So classic tomato sauce, garlic oil, barbecue sauce, cream cheese, sour cream, or shockingly, there'd be the choice to have no sauce at all. I know, scandalous. Wait till you see the dessert menu. Uh, Only joking, it's just tiramisu. But back to the main course. What pizza would you choose? Infinity Pizza has so many choices. Does that make your choice easier or harder to make? Would your brain melt if you had that much choice? Or would you be excited to make the best pizza anyone's ever had? It would take me a long time to choose, so I'd rather just stick with my local pizza place and order from the two pizzas I know I like. It's hard to have the pizza we want when we don't get very much choice, but it can also be really hard when we have so many options. We don't know what we might like or what might go well together. It's also hard to know whether we're ordering a pizza that we think is normal, like what everyone else orders, or whether we should be doing something just for us. The should story about pizza tells us that having a square pizza with barbecue sauce, cheese, and strawberries is just not a normal pizza, even if we really like that. So we need to be able to start listening to ourselves more. How to choose the pizza you actually want. Okay, so maybe Infinity Pizza might not be a great idea because it has too many choices and not enough ideas about what might be good on a pizza. A lot of really popular pizza places offer lots of choice without having to go as far as Infinity Pizza. They offer lots of set names with different set pizzas with different names like Margherita, Napolitana, Quattro Stagioni, Americana, Fiorentino. But they also offer different toppings that you can adapt so that you can adapt one of their set pizzas to suit your tastes. They make suggestions of what toppings would go well on pizza for you to choose from, or you can choose to substitute other toppings. It's clever, because they're giving you a choice of how much you want to choose. You can choose to choose, or they can help choose for you. Another example of this is when you're watching something online and you get recommendations about what you might want to watch next. These recommendations are sometimes based on the things that you like to watch. Sneaky, clever internet. You can choose to watch anything you want from millions and millions of clips, or you can choose not to choose and let the internet tell you what to watch. At Infinity Pizza, I could train the waiters to help you choose. They could ask questions like, is there anything you can't or won't eat? How hungry are you? Do you like sweet, sour, bitter, salty, or savoury tastes? Do you like spicy or cool flavours? Are you in the mood for something adventurous or something familiar? The waiters would take their time and encourage you to slow down and to listen to what your body is telling you. These are the kinds of questions we could learn to ask ourselves and learn to give ourselves time to answer them. Think of the times when you've chosen a pizza or anything else and regretted your choice. It's so hard for us to really listen to our body and say, I want that one. Often because we are feeling so rushed and not taking the time to really listen to our wants and desires. Or maybe we're being so continually distracted by all the should stories that we are constantly being told, rather than what we actually want. Maybe sometimes we don't take the time to listen to what we want because we don't think we deserve to have what we really want. So there's my local pizza place with the should story and not much choice. And then there's Infinity Pizza, where there's too much choice and not enough guidance on how we can choose. And there's the middle ground pizza place, where with help from people making the pizzas, we might be able to listen to our body about what we actually want. Why I'm overcomplicating pizza. There's a reason behind why I'm going into pizza in such great detail. It's important, okay? Every day we make choices, like what shows to watch, what chocolate or pizza to eat, or what fizzy drinks to have. But sometimes our choices are really big ones, like, do I want to be friends with this person? What courses should I take at school? Do I want to have sex? So, learning to choose, even about the small things, is an important practice. The more we practice, the better we'll get, and the quicker we'll be at making choices for ourselves. If we do that on a regular basis, then we can increase our ability to do these things. There's a word for that academics use for this: agency. Chapter 2: Clout or oomph. Agency is about actively and intentionally doing things, making things happen, making choices and the power to make choices, asking for things, exerting our freedom, seeking out what we want in life, trying to make our lives good, and also trying to do this for other people, living our best life, us doing us, that kind of thing. You know, big and important stuff. When you hear agency, think power, clout, or oomph. If we aren't actively choosing things or not making things happen, then we aren't acting with agency. It's harder to see ourselves as having freedom if we aren't actively making choices. So picking the pizza or the chocolate bar, fizzy drink or TV show that we want is actually about living and having a sense of our own power to act. The more we do it, the more we get to have it. However, there are always going to be restrictions. We can't always do whatever we want. The world just wouldn't function if it did. It's not, the world wouldn't function if we did. It's not possible to separate ourselves off from the rest of the world. Like, you can't break the law, and I'm not telling you should listen to your parents, but maybe I am a little bit. We also shouldn't do things that restrict other people's agency. The choices that we make about our own lives shouldn't limit the choices that other people have about theirs. We'll look at this when we get to the consent and other section. And just as we might do things that affect someone else's agency, the reverse is also true. Sometimes it's not just another person, but a group of people, the government, big companies, or cultures and traditions that restrict how much agency we have. And as we've already seen, should stories can restrict how much agency we have. But imagine a world where everyone was able to do what they wanted without hurting anyone. In fact, imagine a world where not only were people not hurting other people with their choices, They were helping as many people as possible make their own choices too. Everyone being free to do whatever they wanted without hurting others or themselves would be wonderful. A world in which everyone tries to maximize each other's agency. But it's not the same for everyone. The idea of actively making choices about our lives might sound a bit obvious to some of you reading this. Hi. But for some of you, it might sound new or a strange idea. Hi to you too. Some people have more capacity to choose what they want than to do than others, and so have more agency. As we'll see later, the discrimination that people face based on their gender, race, sexuality, class, or ability means that some people have more power or privilege than others. We'll cover this in more detail in chapter 10, but for now, it's important to understand how we can all learn to nurture our agency and why that is important. Some of us will find it easier to choose our pizzas because we have enough money to eat pizza a lot, so it doesn't really matter if we choose one we don't like because there's always more pizza. However, some of us will find it less easy to choose because we don't have enough money to eat pizza a lot, so we might not know what we do and don't like yet. Some people might not be able to get into the pizza place because they don't have good disabled access. Maybe people of colour might be treated worse if the boss of the pizza place is racist. A straight couple might feel like they could hold hands in the restaurant, but a same-gender couple might not feel able to. Agency is not something that is shared out fairly in society. People with less money have fewer choices over what they can spend, and so have to be more careful with their choices than people with more money. Disabled people have fewer choices over where they can go because many places are just not accessible enough. Same-gender couples often find it difficult to display affection because of homophobia or biphobia. Racism means that people of colour might be less safe or have fewer rights in various parts of the world. Sexism means that many women don't get treated as well as men at work and also usually get paid less. Transphobia means that many trans people find that they're less able to wear what they want or be what they want because other people may hurt them. This is important stuff, and we'll come back to this later on. Having said all this, agency is something we can learn to grow where we can. And learning to do this through simple everyday things like pizza, chocolate, TV shows, and soda is really important. Learning to grow our agency is important to help us experience joy, excitement, and comfort, but it's also important for other reasons. And a warning, I'm about to bring the mood down. So I think we're about to talk about violence, but I'm not going into any detail here at all. Why agency is important. Sometimes, although we have agency, we have no choice over something happening to us. It could be something like someone we care about dying, a family member, a friend, a pet, a famous person we felt connected to, a relationship ending, illness or injury, being hurt by someone, something else that might cause physical or emotional pain and injury. When someone does something to us rather than with us, or something happens without consent, it's called non-consensual. That's because we don't have a choice. We'll talk more about this later, and I'll give you a heads up when we do. The antidote to crappy things that can happen to us is more agency, and that means more consent, more choice, and more freedom for ourselves. More choices and more freedom for ourselves can't always protect us from bad things happening to us, but they can remind us of who we are and of our power to act, even when choices are taken from us. Thinking carefully about your own choices and what will be best for you is really, really important, even when you're feeling pretty okay with life. But it's especially important if you're not feeling okay or when you've had some of your agency taken away. Learning to practice self-consent or self-care is an extremely good idea. What is self-care, I hear you ask? In a nutshell, self-care isn't about eating a bar of chocolate, having a bubble bath, or doing some exercise. It's about choosing to do something for yourself. It's the process of choosing which chocolate bar you'll have and noticing how it tastes. Self-care is about deciding how bubbly your bubble bath is and whether or not you want to play music or if you want to have your rubber duck with you. It's also about noticing what kind of exercise or movement might be useful to you, listening to your body and gently giving it what it needs. To do this, you could practice listening to your body when you're making a decision about what to do. What does it feel like in your body when you're joyful, sad, scared, or excited about something? Can you learn to notice the feelings in your body where they start from? This isn't easy to do, and you won't always get it right every time. I know that I don't. But trying to do it is a really good thing to practice. It's not what you do, but the process of how you do it. So that's what self-care is. So we started with you. Now, how do you do all these things with other people? Consent and others. Learning how to treat ourselves consensually is really important, but learning to do it whilst also treating someone else consensually is the hard bit. So in this, the biggest section of the book, we'll look at how to negotiate what we do with other people. We'll think about how to meet someone else's needs as well as our own. We'll learn how to ask for things and how to hear and say no. We'll explore how to do more consensual greetings with each other, hugs, handshakes, or fist bumps. Then we'll get on to the sex bit and learn how to put consent into practice when having sex, if sex is something you might want to do at some point in your life. Lastly, we'll think about how we can choose which film to see with a group of friends, learn about group consent. Doing things with other people. By now, you should have a pretty good idea of how we can try to do consent with ourselves and why that's important. In this bit, we're going to look at how you can do consent with others. Whenever you are doing something with someone else, it's important to try and make it consensual for both people involved. In other words, you both freely agree and choose to do something you both want to do. Doing something that you want to do is important, as we discussed in the last chapter, but you shouldn't make someone do something that you want to do just because you want to do it, just as someone else shouldn't do that to you. Consent with another person is more difficult because often you have to make some kind of compromise. Even if you are really trying to give each other as much agency as possible, you might not be able to make a choice that is absolutely ideal for you, even if you freely agree to do it. So you might end up sharing a bit of a dull pizza, watching a TV show you watched before, or playing a game that you're a bit bored of. Sometimes people prefer to do things by themselves just to avoid compromising with someone else. I think that's fair. And I think it's sometimes better to do things by yourself. Certainly better to do that than make someone else do what you want to do if they don't want to. However, if you avoid doing things with other people, you'll miss out. Go through the process of talking about what you need and finding ways to meet each other's needs is the key to really good relationships with people. Having someone else trying to meet your needs while also trying to meet their own is a lovely thing. When you do this, you're also creating a lot of agency for you both. Fun times, shared memories, and support. These are moments you couldn't have captured on your own, and that could only have been shared together. This is what forms wonderful and loving relationships. By putting consent at the heart of your relationships, you can both enjoy doing things together more than you might have done if you'd have done something by yourself. Talking about this stuff can be hard work and a bit frustrating at times. Maybe you've experienced this for yourself. This chapter is all about trying to make it a little easier, and there are lots of ideas about how you could do it. Once you've learned some of these ideas and put them into practice in your everyday life, it will get easier. How to meet each other's pizza needs. Before we go any further, let's have another quick example of how people can meet each other's pizza needs when they share a pizza. If you're bored of me talking about pizza, we're also going to talk about watching a film together. So let's imagine that Margie is a vegetarian and that Rita is a meat eater who can't eat mushrooms. Sounds familiar? How can they both talk about what they want from a pizza so that they're meeting each other's needs? Maybe they could start by talking about which pizzas they don't want or can't eat. Then they could choose from the rest of the available pizzas on the menu. They can go through they can give each other the time and space to go through the choices and ask the waiter to give them a bit more time to choose. They could also decide not to eat pizza at all and go somewhere else. If they were choosing a film, they could chat about what kind of show they feel in the mood for: a comedy, drama, a thriller, or a pizza-themed action film. They could say which shows they don't want to watch, or if they have any phobias. They could say if they don't fancy Too Thin, Too Crispy, an action film about a pizza chef slash crime fighting hero starring Jason Statham. They could give each other time to decide what they'd like to watch. They could eat something while they do that. Perhaps it's something round that's cooked in an oven coming towards them. But back to the restaurant. If they do decide to stay at the pizza place, what could they do to increase their joy? Are there other toppings that they could choose that would make them both happy? Could they divide the pizza in two so that Margie has mushrooms on her side and Rita has pepperoni on her side? Maybe they could add some extra toppings. Perhaps Rita is happy not having any meat on a pizza this time because they know Margie doesn't like to smell it. Perhaps they can encourage each other to agree on what they both want on their pizza rather than thinking about what they should have. They could maximize their pleasure in eating the pizza by being slow, noticing how it tastes, and telling each other how good it is. At the end, they could chat about their thoughts on the pizza and what they might do differently next time. Back to the film. During whatever they're watching, they could notice whether they're enjoying it and ask each other what they think about it. Maybe they could agree to watch it for the first part and then see if they want to carry on. After that, if one person is not really, and see if they want to carry on after that if one person is not really into it. Or maybe one person could just play on their phone while the other person watches what they want to watch. The end. I think that by the end of it, even if neither of them really got their preferred pizza or film, they will probably have both really enjoyed it. The process of trying to meet each other's needs will probably also make them feel closer and more trusting of each other. It's the process of trying to make something as consensual as possible that is the key to good relationships. It's not what you do, it's how you do it together. Now we're going to have a look at how to ask and how to hear and know. Chapter 4. How to ask. An important part of consent is learning how to ask. It's really not cool to do something to someone without asking them first. That's pretty basic bad behaviour, and we should never do it. However, we can also ask people to do things in ways that aren't consensual without meaning to. If you're confused about how to ask for consent, over the next few pages are some things you can do to help you understand it a bit more. I think actually we should say, if you're confused about how to ask for things more consensually rather than asking for consent, I don't like that phrase. Anyway, do they want you to ask? Obviously, you won't know if you don't ask, but has the person given you an indication that they'd be interested in you asking them for something? For example, if you're going to ask someone out on a date, have they shown any interest in you going on a date with you? It's usually not a good idea to ask someone to do anything out of the blue. It also makes it more likely that they will say no, and so you'll feel a bit stung by the rejection. Make it clear what you're asking for. If you're asking someone to make a choice, then it's best to tell them as much as you can about what you're asking for and why. So if you're going to have a date with, if you're asking someone to go on a date with you, is that because you would like to snog them, because you want to get to know them, or so you can be friends? It wouldn't be very consensual if you suggested doing something without telling them everything it might involve. This doesn't mean that you need to use the words, want to go on a date so we can snog? Instead, you can you can give the other person an idea of what it is that you want from the thing that you're asking for. Like, is this a friend date or a romantic date? Who are you asking for? A classic mistake that people make when asking someone to do something that they don't make it clear who it's for. Is it something you want them to do for you, or for you to do for them, or for you to do together? I think it would be great if we could all be a bit clearer about this. It's okay for us to ask someone to do something, and it's okay for us to ask someone to do something for us, and it's okay for us to do something for someone else because someone has asked. For example, if someone close to you looks like they might want a hug, you could ask them if that was something you could do for them. If you're the one wanting a hug, it's better for you to ask them if they could hug you. However, if you asked them if they wanted a hug when it was actually you who wanted the hug, then you've made this about your needs while pretending that it was about theirs. That's not okay. If you want a hug, you could ask for a hug. Ask in a way that gives options. Remember that consent is all about agency. So, how can you ask in a way that gives the person the most amount of choice possible? A good starting point here is to ask a question that gives more than two options. So, instead of, do you want to watch Too Thin, Too Crispy later? You could say, what are your thoughts about watching something like, I don't know, Too Thin, Too Crispy later? If we were asking someone for a hug, we could say, what are your thoughts about having a hug? Or how do you feel about a quick hug, a cuddle, me putting my hand on your shoulder? Even better, we could say, is there any kind of support that you might like right now? Like a hug, bar of chocolate, some advice, or some space. We need to get better at asking people so that they have options. If the options we give someone are, do you want this or do you not want this? That doesn't really give them much freedom. So even though it can be awkward, start thinking about how you can ask for something in a way which gives the person more than just the choice of doing it or not doing it. Aim for at least three possible choices of doing something, as well as just not doing anything. It's not always easy, but it's what we should aim for, I think. Just ask once. Once you've asked them, that's it. Only ask them once. You can ask if they have any other questions or if they need any more information that might help them to come to their decision. But once they have all of that, give them some space. It's not consensual to try to make someone do what you want them to do. Don't pester or nag someone into doing something. Be polite and say please if you want to, but don't say please or I beg of you. Give them time and space. Give them the room to be able to come to their own decision. Don't just stand there and wait until they say yes or not. Have you ever seen a public marriage proposal on TV or social media? I watch those things through my hands, cringing with embarrassment. This situation is extremely bad for a number of reasons. She's under pressure to answer the question then and there. She only has a choice of yes or no. Everyone else around her is pressuring her to say yes because that's what women are supposed to do. And you might notice here that I've used the pronouns she, her here. That's because it's usually a man asking a woman. We'll talk about should stories for women later. Listen to their no. Ideally, we'd ask questions that don't need yes or no answers. But if someone does say no to you, then you should listen, accept their decision, and try not to change their mind. Saying, I'll go on, or you know you want to, or can't you do this one thing for me, or if you loved me, you would, is not asking consensually. These are ways of trying to make the other person do something out of guilt or making them feel like they owe you something. It's ignoring their agency. As we've discussed before, that's not cool. Stop it. Chapter 5 about no. Sadly, some people are going to put us in a situation where we have to say no sometimes. We shouldn't be put in these situations in the first place and shouldn't need to say no. But because this does happen, I think it could be useful to learn how to say no in these sorts of situations. If we're being asked to do something consensually, then we'll be able to choose different things based on what we may or may not want to do. If we're having to say no, it's because we haven't been given enough choices. Our actions mean no too. We don't just say word, we don't just say no with words, we say it with our actions. In fact, research shows that people often don't use the word no when they're being asked whether they want to do something. Think about the times when you didn't want to do something. Instead of saying no, you might have said, um, or I don't know, or went quiet and shrugged your shoulders. These are all forms of no, and hopefully the other person would have understood that. In fact, the same research found that we understand that different gestures or phrases mean no, even if someone doesn't say no. Most people can recognize when someone is saying no with with their body rather than with their mouths. However, there are good reasons why many people can't recognize this kind of unspoken no. We have different levels of understanding of other people's reactions. Some of us have difficulty reading people, which is fair enough. So if you're one of these people, you might need to chat with the person you're asking about what their response is, and perhaps explain that you find it difficult to understand body language. The thing to remember here is that if they are not saying a no or a yes, it's a no. Default to no. The absence of a no does not mean a yes. If everyone buys this book, and I hope they do because my pizza habit isn't cheap, and learns how to ask consensually, then maybe we won't have to say no. But until they do, we will sometimes need to say no to people. Here's how. 1. You should only have to say no once. Increase your chances of your no being heard by saying it clearly. You could perhaps put your hand out in front of you at the same time and say no. If they keep asking and keep saying no if they keep asking, then keep saying no each time. Think about getting help if they aren't listening to you or moving into a more public space where people can see you. If they're doing it via their phone, you could say no and mute or block them. If they're being persistent to the point of harassing you, you could perhaps get a trusted adult to help you. They could either intervene on your behalf or help you to report it. Field what they say and throw it back. Another thing you can do is to repeat back what they're saying and say no. An example of this is, I know you want to go out with me, but I don't want to, so no. You're fielding or catching what they're saying and throwing it back to them. It shows that you've heard them, but you're telling them what you want. If it's safe, you could add a bit of humour if you feel like it. So humour might work. Sometimes saying something funny can diffuse a difficult situation and gives everyone the option of backing out, especially if you've already said no and they haven't heard it. If you search the internet for funny ways to say no, there are lots of different responses, and it shows what a problem it is for lots of people. I would go with, it's a no from me, and be all Simon Cowell about it, or I've consulted with my legal team and they say no, sorry about that. You could turn the tables. If they try to make you feel guilty about saying no, you might want to turn the tables on them. So if they say, if you were my friend or if you loved me, then you can turn that around and say it right back at them. If they were your friend or if they loved you, then they would treat you more consensually. This isn't a book about relationships, but remember that love isn't just something you say, it's something you do. Doing things consensually is a way of being loving to people. Making someone do something they don't want to do isn't. You could have a saying ready. Have a saying ready. Try having a t-shirt. So try having a saying ready too. I have a t-shirt that says sorry, not sorry in big letters because I like that expression. You could say it's a no, sorry, not sorry about that. Pick a phrase that you keep repeating over and over again so it becomes as easy as saying or dunno. Getting assertive. Lastly, sometimes you might have to get really assertive with someone if they're being very unreasonable with you. Below is a 4-point action plan about how to do this. 1. Point out their rubbish behaviour, like them not listening to your no. 2. Say how it's making you feel, maybe scared, angry, sad, or disappointed. 3. Tell them what you want them to do. Listen or stop. 4. Tell them what will happen if you don't. You might unfriend them or report to someone. All of this can be really difficult, and examples of when our agency can be affected by someone else. But although we're being put in the unpleasant position of having to say it, saying no can sometimes be really good for us. Remember that we're saying no to them and yes to us. That in itself gives us agency. Remember that even after all this, if we don't manage to say no, it doesn't make it okay for someone to treat us non-consensually. We shouldn't be put in the position of having to say no. They are the person in the wrong, not us. Chapter 6. Consensual Greetings. In life, there are some things that we do that we don't ask for in the same way that we might order a pizza. Greetings is one of them. Handshakes, fist bumps, nods, salutes, hugs, kisses, the different kinds of physical interactions we do with different people when we meet them. They happen all the time, but have you ever thought about how to do them consensually? Don't worry, just like with pizza, I've spent way too much time thinking about this. You're welcome! Spoiler alert, it's also going to be a metaphor for sex. But for the moment, don't think about sex. So I'll tell you when we get to the sex bit. But for now, keep thinking about greetings. Keep thinking about greetings, and that'll be great. So this is like we're learning how to do more consensual greetings, and we're learning how to have more consensual sex, um, by learning about what we've learned about greetings. Does that make sense? Okay. The greetings we should do. Imagine that you're meeting someone for the first time. How do you greet them? To save awkwardness, there are usually social customs for how we are meant to do that. For example, in the UK, where I live, we're supposed to shake hands. In different parts of the world, it might be different. It might be kisses, fist bumps, hugs, a non-contact greeting like a wave, a salute, or a hands together acknowledgement. But crucially, there is usually some kind of local custom for what kind of greeting we should do. There are usually quite strict rules about how to do the greeting too. In the UK, the unspoken rules with handshakes say that we should be right-handed, have a medium to firm grip, a dry hand, go up and down for 2 to 3 seconds, and then you're done. There could be a bit of eye contact, but not too much. Again, there are rules about how you're supposed to do different greetings in different countries, and even in different parts of a country. What are yours? This way of doing handshakes works for a lot of people, but it doesn't work for everyone. For example, left-handed people will rarely get to shake hands with their left hand. Some people find that handshakes can be a bit too firm or a bit too soft for them because there's no agreement about what medium firm means. So some people will feel like their hands are being crushed, but others will feel like their hands are coming into contact with a wet halibut. It's not clear whether we're meant to change our handshake depending on whose hand we're shaking. Wait, so how do we do it if we are shaking the hand of someone with a different gender to us, or if someone's hand is a lot bigger or smaller than ours? What about shaking hands with someone who is older or younger than us? Some people describe themselves as huggers. They might decide that a handshake isn't really enough of a greeting and might put their arms out to upgrade it to a hug. That's great if the other person wanted the same, but what if they didn't? Newsflash, some people really, really hate hugs, and that's okay. Remember when I told you about should stories? As you can see, this applies to greetings too. There's a should story for what kinds of greetings we should be doing and how we should be doing them, even though we can't agree on exactly how. Should stories about greetings make us think that we have to greet everyone the same way. It can lead us to taking part in greetings that we feel like we should do rather than what we want to do. Some of the things that happen in greetings might not be consensual, like going in for a hug, using a grip that's too firm, or using a finger to stroke the other person's hand in a handshake, which sounds gross, so don't do that. So why can't we do a handshake that is more consensual? Is it possible to express what we want from a greeting? Can we even work out what greeting we want? Are we able to not only talk about how to greet each other, but also to be able to do the greeting in a way which is mutually more fun and nice? Negotiating a greeting. So, how can we do that? We could start by asking and giving each other options. We could say handshake, hug, or kiss when we first meet someone. Even better would be to say something like, how do you feel about having a greeting of some kind? I'd be up for a handshake or fist bump or hug. Do you have any particular greetings that you particularly like? If you both agree to stick to the handshake, maybe you could negotiate which hand you want to use. If both hands are available, you could use for you both to use. You could Would you prefer a completely dry hand or a slightly clammy hand? Yeah, would you prefer a completely dry hand or a slightly clammy hand? How firm do you want it to be? You could negotiate it from a 10, which is bone crushing, to a 1, which is the wet halibut. Do you want to go up and down or side to side? How big do you want the movement to be? How long do you want the greeting to last for? But you could also just, not. It'd be great if we could do all of this. But it's not something I'd do with people I don't know. However, I have negotiated greetings with people I am close to. This has ranged from a firm handshake, a kiss on the cheek, each other's right cheek, a kiss on the lips, steady now, and a hug with a firm squeeze of about 2 to 3 seconds. I use this activity when I teach people about consent. I ask people to try to negotiate greetings with each other, and a lot of people have told me what they thought about it. Some thought it a bit strange at first, but then they really got into it. Others liked the fact that they could spend a bit of time finding out more from each other about what they both wanted. Some handshakes developed into something more elaborate and silly. Others negotiated hugs or another kind of greeting. Some of them enjoyed being able to choose their greetings together. They liked that they could meet each other's needs and have their needs met. They also thought it was more fun. But others thought it was too awkward. It raised their expectations of the handshake. There was too much pressure, and it all went wrong. Maybe this is something you could try with a friend or family member. Try negotiating next time you have a greeting with someone and see how it goes. How to do a more consensual greeting. So there's the should story about how to do a greeting. It's sometimes okay, but it doesn't always give us what we want from a greeting. And sometimes it can be non-consensual. The other option, think infinity pizza, is to talk about our wants and needs from a greeting. Negotiate what kind of greeting might meet those needs for us both, and then do a more consensual and mutual greeting. A lot of people would like that, but it's also too awkward for a lot of people to actually put into practice. Is there a way to get the best of both worlds and have a greeting that is more mutual and consensual? No, there is absolutely no way to do a greeting can be consensual. Only joking. Of course there is. Say a group of you are going out for pizza and you're meeting a friend of a friend for the first time. How are you going to greet them when you've never met them before? The thing to do is to slow everything down and concentrate on what is actually happening. Are they moving towards you or away from you? Are they standing back like they just want to nod their heads and not have a Are they standing back like they just want to nod their heads and not have a physical greeting? Or are they moving towards you for some kind of physical greeting? If their hand is coming out, is it stretched or do they want a handshake? Or is the hand bunched up like they want to do a fist bump? Do they look like they want to go for a hug? If you move towards them first, are they moving towards you or have they taken a step back in response? How do you feel about that? If you're not feeling it, you could put your arms down. If you're looking to do a hug, where are their arms in response to your movement? Remember, it's always better to not do something than to do it if you're not sure how the other person is feeling. If it looks like you're going to have a greeting, pay attention to the moment of contact. So if it's a handshake, try to adjust the firmness to match what they're doing. That way, it's not going to be too firm or too soft. Try to notice if there's resistance in their hand. This might tell you if you're going in the wrong direction for them. Also notice when the handshake starts and when it stops. When does the other person want to loosen their hand? Can you manage to do that at the same time? Notice whether either of you say anything during it and whether they are flinching or finding the greeting uncomfortable. Check in with their facial expressions afterwards to see whether this is something that was okay for them. Hopefully, if they've read this book, they'll be doing this for you too. Perhaps it might have been a really good greeting because you were trying to make it as okay as you could for both of you. Next time you greet someone, try it. Slow everything down and see if you can aim for a mutually consensual greeting. It's hard to do because greetings only last for a couple of seconds, but it's a way of bringing more consent into our daily lives. It's also a way of practicing for other interactions. Yes, that's right. We're going to talk about sex. The sex bit. All that stuff about greetings is important because I think we need to be doing better at consent in all parts of life. But it's also super relevant to sex too. Like with greetings, sex is often not something that people ask questions about in the same way that we ask someone what game they want to play, what show they want to watch, or, pizza. The following section will look at ideas about how you can bring in more choice and freedom when it comes to sex. We'll also talk about what it is about sex that makes it so tricky. The next bit will feature most of the sexual content in the book, so it's okay if you aren't ready to learn about this yet. Either skip ahead or put the book down for a bit. Either way, it's totally fine. The should stories about sex. Remember how I was saying that there are stories about greetings that we should about which say how we should do them, and that we should do them in a particular way? In other words, should stories? Well, it's the same for sex. One story says that everyone is interested in having sex at some point. There's another story which says that sex is a particular set of acts done in a particular order. And there's a story that if we don't want to talk about it, oh, wait. And there's a story that we don't need to talk about it if we don't meet, if we, and there's a story that we don't need to talk about it if we meet the right person. All these stories are not true. Not everyone is interested in having sex. I won't go into much detail about sexualities here, but some people don't experience sexual attraction, feelings, or desires. They're just not into it. This is called asexuality. There are variations of this where people are more interested in sex if they are interested in a person, but ultimately, not everyone is interested in having sex. Some people are not interested in having sex yet. Many people want to wait until they're older before they have sex, or wait until they're in a relationship, or even when they get married. These are all completely fine ways to feel about sex. It's also fine if people are really super interested in having sex and being sexually attracted to people. However, the should story would have us believe that you have to be interested in sex, not too much, but just enough. And I hate that should story. Should story about what sex is. The should story about what sex is also puts pressure on us. If I was to say that there was a picture of two people having sex on the next page, there isn't. But what do you think? What do you imagine you might see? I think that most people would imagine that it would be a man and a woman, usually with the man on top. They'd be naked in bed, and the man would have a penis and would be inside the woman's vagina. Any other kind of sex, like kissing, stroking, or licking, is considered foreplay and isn't part of real sex. This is what we are told sex is. It's what counts as sex. We see it in sex advice books, Hollywood sex scenes, TV sex scenes, and porn sex scenes, as well as lots of other kinds of sex too. It's what we're often taught in sex ed class, which is usually don't get someone pregnant, and that's it. This story is wrong and really quite a problematic way of thinking. It leaves out people who can't have the kind of sex or who don't want to have that kind of sex. People who are disabled or who identify as LGBTQIA, lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, intersex, asexual, and many others, are often excluded from this very narrow idea of what sex is. A lot of people don't or can't enjoy this kind of sex. This sex should story puts a lot of pressure on us to have sex in a way that we might not be able to or might not enjoy. When we say that sex is this one thing, that means they're either doing it or not doing it, which, as we have seen, is not much choice at all. Often when people have sex, they are so into the idea of doing it that they are just following the story of what sex is, rather than paying attention to the needs of the person they're doing it with. Not exactly infinity pizza, is it? And okay. What if sex was many things? As with greetings, the story we have been told about sex and how we should do it can make it harder to enjoy it consensually. So instead of sex being just one thing that we may do or not do, what if it was many, many different things? What if it was like Infinity Pizza, where you could choose your own bases, your own sauces, and your own toppings? What if you could have whatever kind of pizza you wanted, and you and the person were having sex with could figure that out together? Well, good news, it is. Imagine a graph. On the left-hand side, there are all the parts of somebody's body that could be touched. At the bottom, There are all the parts of somebody's body that could touch another person in every way possible. For example, using your fingers to stroke someone's hair, face, or knee, or using your tongue to lick their nipple, lips, or armpit. There would be so many different options. And that's just from touch. As well as touching, sex is about the things we might say, hear, see, or imagine. Of course, just like choosing pizza, the choice can be overwhelming. That's fine. You don't have to like everything, and it's more than likely that you won't. There also might be some things that you don't know if you like or not. The key is to try and find out what is going to work for you and someone else consensually. This does mean that you need to do some talking before anything happens. As we found with greetings, talking about what we want from a situation and then negotiating how to do it can be very tricky. But it's even more important to be able to do this with sex than it is with greetings. The crucial thing to remember here is that sex isn't just one thing. It's also not one thing that someone does to another person. It's lots of different things that we do by ourselves, but also with other people. It's an activity we take part in together. In the UK, legally, you have to be over 16 to have any kind of sex with anyone. Across the world, it's usually between 16 and 18 for all genders. Sadly, in a small number of countries, it's illegal to have sex with someone of the same gender at all. Search legal age to have sex if you're unsure. In the UK, it's unlikely you'll get in trouble if you're just under 16, are both around the same age, and your relationship is consensual and not abusive. This applies to any sexual activity with another person. The law exists to protect young people from abuse, particularly the younger person. Okay, I've stopped wagging my finger now. Here are some tips about how to get started. Talking about talking. There are lots of different kinds of sex, and you get to choose which, if any, you would like to do. But how might you talk about what kind of sex you want? And how do you negotiate it with someone? A lot of people feel really anxious talking about sex. It's partly because they've not had very much practice at choosing what they want to do, but it's also because sex can be difficult to talk about for a lot of people. Sadly, there's a lot of stigma and shame when it comes to talking about sex. Some people get more stigma for talking about it than others. More about this later. For many of us, we were taught that sex is something we shouldn't really mention because talking about it is rude. But when young people are thinking of actually having sex, adults sometimes say, you need to be able to talk about it, or if you can't talk about it, you shouldn't be doing it, which is all very confusing and conflicting. Your ability to talk about what you want or don't want from sex is going to be related to what kind of sex education you've had. If you've had really good sex education, either at home or at school, you'll have had some practice using the words and will feel less awkward about it. If, however, you haven't had such great sex education, then you might notice that you're embarrassed to talk about it. If the whole idea just fills your head with cringy thoughts, it might be good to say this to the person that you're interested in having sex with. Try, hi, I'm very interested in having some sexy times, but I have no idea how to talk about it, what or when. Can we chat about that? Talking about the fact that it's awkward can make some of the awkwardness go away. It's better for you to both acknowledge that it's awkward and that you don't quite know what to do next, rather than to say nothing at all. I think it would be better for people who have lots of sex to be more like this too. It means you can start to have a conversation about how you begin. If we're all trying to be as consensual as possible at all times, that includes how we talk about having sex. Some people can talk about what they want quite clearly, others less so. You could agree that one person starts with some suggestions of things they might like to do. Try the should story for sex if that works for you, but be slow and let each other stop or change things. Start slow and do a couple of things. See how it goes, chat about it afterwards. Just see how things go and agree to communicate with each other during it. Talk about everything you'd like to try and how you'd like to do it. You could do this either by text or in person. Chat about how much talking during sex is okay. For example, you might decide that checking in with each other is good from time to time, but not all the time. Agree how you'll say no. For example, I'll just stop if I'm not into it anymore. Talking about exactly what you want to do. Like we discussed earlier, pizza places can give us lots of choices by offering different kinds of pizza. To make our choices easier, we can do that with sex too. So instead of trying to choose from the infinite number of sex things that can be experienced, it might be better to choose from a menu of things that people often enjoy when they have sex. Opposite is a list of things that people might like. For each one, you can go through and ask yourself and each other if they are a no, maybe, or yes. Or you could give them a score on a scale of -10, 0 to +10. So remember that not everyone likes all these things. That's the point. They are not in any particular order. I'm not creating a should story here. So, knee stroking, ear nibbling or licking, deep kissing with tongues, massaging each other naked, gentle kissing on the cheek, kissing on the lips, stroking wrists and hands, using a mouth on a penis or clitoris, stroking naked nipples, kissing face, eyes, neck, ears, and cheeks, solo masturbation next to each other, having vaginal sex with fingers, penis, or sex toys, stroking a penis or clitoris directly, having anal sex with fingers, penis, or sex toys, touching chest, bum, or other parts of body with clothes on, gently biting, sending a text saying they're turned on, holding hands, wearing an eye mask, giving each other a shoulder rub with clothes on, tickling, stroking the penis or vulva through underpants, rubbing genitals together, spooning, lying up close against their back, sending a sexy pic. It's only legal to do this if you are over the age of 18. Uh, Dry humping, rubbing up against each other with clothes on, sharing sexy fantasies. I should just say there about the sexting thing. The police are not likely to investigate if the pics were sent consensually. The law is to protect under 18s from having their pics shared without their consent. It's much more about that at Bish. Talking about sex makes things a bit easier because you can just have some ideas of how to begin. Just like with pizza, you can choose an option and then have something taken off if you don't want. For example, just like you could take mushrooms off a veggie pizza, you could choose to snog but without tongues. When you get more experienced and learn more about sex, then you could broaden out the list of things that you might be into and create your own much bigger menu. Create your own much bigger menu. Or you could create a very small list of things on your menu, and that would be okay too. When you're faced with a big list of options, the easiest thing to do at first is to think about what you really don't want and can't have, like meat and mushrooms. That's an easy question you could ask each other before sex. For example, you could text each other and say, when we're having sexy times, is there anything you really aren't into or anything you don't want to happen? It can be really easy to answer what you aren't into, and that can make it easier to talk about what we might be into. Thinking about sex as being many, many different things rather than just one thing means that more people feel like they might be interested in having sex. But it's also completely okay for you to look at the list of sex things and to think no to most or even all of them. You do not have to be interested in having any kind of sex now or ever. We often don't know if we are going to be into something before we do it. One of the ways that we learn about our likes and dislikes is by having a go. However, we can also make a pretty good guess about what we might feel ready for or what we're interested in based on how we feel about our bodies and whether we've had sex before much by ourselves. This is called solo sex, touching your body in ways that feel sexy, like masturbation. So, when you're thinking about the different kinds of sex you might be into, it's okay to be unsure. You might want to learn more about something first. You might want to, you might need certain things to happen to make you feel more comfortable. For example, them washing their hands before keep. For example, them washing their hands before keeping some clothes on, or using a condom for oral sex. Much more about that at Bish. When you start learning about the available options, there may be some things that you are very yes about. But it's also okay to be very yes about a particular kind of sex and then realize you're not into it at all. A yes can quite quickly become a no during sex, and it should always be okay for us to say so. The other person should always, always be okay with stopping. Scoring system. Think about the different ways of think about the different kinds of sex And whether you say yes, no, or maybe gives us quite a lot of choice, but could increase our choices even more. You could chat about how interested you are in different things by rating each kind of sexual activity with the -10 to 0 to +10 scale. -10, I really don't want to. 0, I'm not sure, meh, I don't mind either way. Or +10, I'm really keen on doing this. Being clear about how much we want to do something means that we can think about who we're doing something for, whether it's for yourself, for the other person, or for each other equally. If you were, say, +2 on, say, knee stroking, hey, that's a thing, and the other person was +9, then you might be quite happy for them to get their knee out because you knew that they would really like it. It's okay to enjoy doing something for someone else, and if they enjoy it, then our enjoyment might also increase. It also means that you can ask the other person for something you might like, such as having your neck stroked like a cat. For consent to happen, we shouldn't have to do something we don't want to do. So if we were a -2 on the knee stroking, the other person should take that as a no unless we say otherwise. But so long as we are somewhere on the plus scale, it's okay for us to have different levels of enthusiasm for different kinds of sex. Otherwise, we might miss out on the sex we want to have. If a time comes when you're ready to talk about this, you can have these conversations in person before you have sex or in texts before you have sex. Sending texts is a great way of communicating what you like or don't like, and you can spend time getting the wording right. It's also a good way of asking for something specific or for pointing out something you really aren't into. If you do this in combination with talking about what sex you want to have, then this can be really effective. You can even tell each other sexy stories, which also counts as sex, even if you aren't together. It's also a great way to communicate after sex. It can be a lovely, sexy thing to chat about the sex, what went well, what you like to do differently next time. Think of it as like post-match analysis, though hopefully without all those dodgy offside decisions. So you can send texts as a method of communication, but if you are sending a sexy text, remember that this is also sexual activity. So if you are sending texts that are sexual rather than just communicating, then make sure this is being done consensually and safely. So all of this chapter is relevant for sex too. How to communicate. Whether you are choosing to follow the should story a bit, just starting out with a couple of things, or have fully worked out how you're going to have sex, it's crucially important that you're able to communicate during sex too. Because consent needs to happen all the time, all throughout sex, not just at the beginning. Even if you can't or don't want to talk about everything before sex, it's important to be able to communicate during it. Even if you talked about what you would like to do beforehand, it's okay for people to change their mind at any time. So here are some tips on how to communicate. It's a bit like when we're talking about how to make greetings more consensual by looking at body language. I call this micro communication. These tips don't work for everyone, and not everyone will be able to do all of them. For example, if you have difficulties seeing or hearing. So there are lots of different ways to communicate you can try. And remember, the different kinds of responses mean different things with different people. You might need to use different methods of communication during sex to understand what is going on for the other person. Good communication also means that you might need to slow things down and check in with each other regularly. Sometimes that might not be the sexy thing to do, but it's definitely the right thing to do. Sometimes, in order to have consensual sex, you need to not have sex. Eye contact. We can sometimes tell from looking into someone's eyes whether they are into something, especially if it's accompanied by a nod of the head or a smile or an "oh yeah." Sometimes people might make direct contact, eye contact, as if to say yes, and sometimes as if to say no, I'm serious, this has to stop. If someone is looking away, it might mean that they aren't interested, that they aren't into what is happening, but it could also mean that they're in their own space and having a great time. It could also mean that they don't really like eye contact. Some people find that eye contact is a bit too intense for them. Eye contact means different things, so it's useful to pay attention to their body language. If you have any doubts, stop and ask how they are feeling. It doesn't always mean the same thing for the same person. Because people's sex faces are confusing. No, wait. Because people's sex faces are different and can be confusing, it's important to check in with them. Being able to see people's facial expressions or able to hear what they're saying or lip read what they're saying is important if you're new to having sex with each other. This is why I recommend having sex in a face-to-face position in the beginning. If you can't see their facial expression very well, either because it's dark or because you can't see, you could try some of these other methods. Noises. Sometimes people make lots of noise when they're enjoying sex, but sometimes they don't. Some people might be more shy about being vocal than others. This means that if someone is quiet during sex, then things might still be going well for them. The level of noise varies for everyone. It's a very personal thing. Sometimes a pleasure sound can sound like a pain sound, and that can be very confusing when you're new to sex. So, if you are confused about what someone's noise means, it's a good idea to stop and check in with them. It's always better to be cautious. Just because someone isn't shouting no or stop doesn't mean that they are happy continuing. Words. If you're doing the start slow and see how you get on approach to sex, you could actually talk during it. Once things get going, you can use short phrases to say what you want. You can also encourage your partner to do what feels good. Short phrases are easier to say. You can also whisper them in someone's ear, which might also be easier. Phrases like, can you move, or just there, or bit softer, harder, faster, slower, or keep going, or slow down, or shh, or whelp, or bingo, that kind of thing. Also, remember to listen to their breathing. A sharp intake of breath might mean that something hurts or was a surprise. A long exhale might mean that someone is really relaxed and enjoying it. However, if someone nods off because they're so relaxed or if they're sleepy from alcohol, for example, you must stop. Because someone can't consent if they aren't awake. Hands. You're allowed to use your hands if you want. Sex isn't football. You can move someone's hand if they're touching you in a place in a way that you aren't keen on, or you can put their hand on your hand and guide them to where you like to be touched and how. A tap on the shoulder might mean that they've had enough of that thing, or a hand being placed on your chest to hold you back might mean, give me a sec. If someone is holding you in place, that mean right there, or just like that, or don't stop. Talking about what these different hand signals might mean would be a great idea, especially if you don't like talking during sex, or if you have disabilities that might make communicating by sight or sound difficult. Bodies. If people's bodies move towards each other or copy each other, this is a sign that they're enjoying what the other person is doing. It may be a sign that they're enjoying what the other person is doing. Remember that even if someone looks like they're physically aroused, that doesn't always mean they want to have or want to continue having sex. If someone moves away, becomes very passive, or leaves the room, it's the sign that they aren't happy or need a break. Look out for if people suddenly twitch or tense up. This might be a sign that something is wrong. If someone starts to gradually tremble or shake, then that might be a sign that they are enjoying it. However, everyone reacts in different ways, and that's true when sex is consensual and also not consensual, sexual assault. When to stop. Here are times when you need to kill the mood, stop everything, and actually talk. If they look unhappy or aren't engaging. If something has happened, if something has changed during sex, for example, if the condom has broken or come off. If you want to do something different to what you've already done. If sex is getting uncomfortable or painful for you or you think it might be for them. Remember, someone should only have to say no or stop or wait once. If someone says this to you, you must stop. Chapter 8. Meh, let's not. It should always be okay to just not do something, but often it isn't okay. I suppose there being some things that most of us have to do, like school or work, it's often a lot of pressure on us to do what someone else is asking us to do. That can come from people we're close to who want us to do something, and it might be that we want to please them more than we want to please ourselves, but it can also come from society. For one thing, when everyone else is doing something, or when we think everyone else is doing something, then there can be a lot of peer pressure. Everyone else seems to be doing this, so maybe I should do it too. That kind of thing. For me, this happens if I'm trying to cross a road and a load of people next to me start to cross. When they all move, I start to move too, without thinking about whether it's actually safe to cross the road or not. The fact that peer pressure can happen to me, a 44-year-old, well, I'm 49 now, and that still happens, who writes about consent, means that it can happen to anyone. Another source of pressure is the whole, well, you've done this once, you've done this once. Ah, well, once you've done this step, you should be able to take the next step. It can be sex, relationships generally, or even greetings again. For example, for a lot of people, the should story that is that you do a handshake when you don't know a person so well, and then when you've met them a few times, you take the next step and do hugs. I'm usually pretty chill with that, to be honest, but a friend of mine really hates hugs. And there's always a lot of pressure on him to do it because it's the next step. It should just be fine to stay on the step where you're comfortable. Pressure also comes from stories in films, TV, songs, or the internet, like a spooky story where there's a group of people and they should go into an old haunted looking house, or in a romantic comedy where one of the characters should propose marriage to someone, or where someone should confront the school bully by themselves because we're supposed to feel brave and courageous. Go inside that haunted house, get down on one knee, or learn karate to defend ourselves from the bully. But often in life, it's better just to not. Not doing something can actually be the brave thing to do. Pressure can often mean that it feels easier to do something rather than not, like taking part in a hug just because someone is putting their arms out, or watching a film we don't like because everyone else does. But doing something because of pressure can hurt us and other people because we aren't thinking about what they want or need, and that's not consensual. It's the should story again, something that we should do rather than what we might or might not want to do. It's really, really powerful. And I'm not joking when I say it's something that I still struggle with. Again, I'm 44/49 now. So actually, the brave thing to do is to have conversations, give each other options, check in with each other, and give each other and ourselves a way out of doing something. Practicing consent is better than doing the thing. If we were really doing consent with ourselves and others, we would be doing a lot less, or doing a lot less, doing lots of different kinds of things. All the ideas I've given you should help you with that. Have conversations, give each other options, check in with each other, give each other and ourselves a way out of doing something. Drink and drugs. A lot of people feel they need to take drink or drugs before they have sex. Remember that you have to be over 18 to drink alcohol, and drugs are illegal in the UK. This might be to relax them, to give them confidence, or to help them feel less cringe about the whole thing. But if everyone had proper sex education and was taught about consent, then they might not feel like they have to. Although people might think that drink and drugs can make it easier for them to have sex, it actually makes it harder to have consent. As we've talked about throughout this book, consent is about freedom, choices, and agency. The more we might drink or take, the less agency we might end up having, particularly if we don't know what we're doing, are dazed, out of it, or getting sleepy. If we are drunk or high, it's also a lot harder to communicate properly in the way that we need to make sex consensual. It can be harder for us to communicate, but it can also be harder for us to accurately understand what the other person is saying to us. And remember that being drunk or high is no excuse for something non-consensual happening. In fact, it's often proof in legal cases that consent can't have been given. Okay, so we're about to talk about non-consensual things happening, but there are no graphic details about anything at all here. What if something non-consensual happens? Non-consensual things happen all the time, either to us or caused by us to others. Sometimes it doesn't cause any real harm and it wasn't intentional, like me bumping into someone in the street. I say, sorry, they hold up their hand to say it's fine, we carry on. However, sometimes people can be harmed from non-consensual actions in a much more serious way. What can we do if we have been affected by these actions? Read on for some options. We can report it. To make someone responsible for what they did, as well as getting support, you can report what happened. If it was a crime like assault, sexual assault, or rape, You can report it to the police or go to a sexual assault referral centre, which also offers a healthcare service. There are some contacts at the back of the book that you might find helpful if you ever find yourself in a non-consensual situation. It's also a useful, hopefully, a useful web page at my website, Bish. You can find it on the homepage at Bish. It says Sexual Health Services, and on that page, it's got details about where you can find services near you in the UK. If the incident happened at school, college, university, or work, you could also try telling someone about someone there. There will usually be someone in these institutions you can report to. They should also have a clear policy about what it is they will do, what support you can expect, and what might happen to someone who was the perpetrator, whoever did the thing. Support. It's probably a good idea to get some support from someone who you can trust and who is wise and who is not the perpetrator to help you. It can be really difficult to cope with our reactions to non-consensual stuff, and our feelings, thoughts, and actions can be confusing. Sometimes we fight or run away in order to keep ourselves safe. When we're under attack, our bodies take over and we don't really get control over how we respond. So having someone there for you is super important. If you're being called on to help someone who's been through something non-consensual, the most important thing is to be as consensual towards them as possible. At the beginning of this book, we looked at agency and freedom as an antidote to things that have happened to us we didn't want. So if you are supporting someone, try to find out what kinds of support they might want, either by asking, giving options, or being slow and trying to tune into what they want. About this thing about how we respond, which I just talked about here as well. So I was talking here about the flight or fight, but there's also freeze, where people might kind of freeze in a situation where they're experiencing non-consent, or sometimes also fawn, where they might go through with something in order for it to get it over and done with as quickly as possible. But none of those things meant that they were wanting it to happen or were enjoying it in any way. It's just, as I say here, the body just responds all by itself in through the via the autonomic nervous system in order to keep us safe. If you hurt someone, if you're the person who hurt someone, it's time to listen to what they want. Often they will want some space and time away from you. After some time, they might want you to listen to them or to someone else on their behalf about what you did. They might also want you to take responsibility and say what you're going to do to show that you've learnt from it and won't do it again. Consent in groups. Chapter 9. A lot of the time you're doing stuff, you're going to be in a group of people. Could be a group of friends, hanging out with family, being in class, at a youth group, playing sport, playing in a band or something else. So, how do you consent when there are several people to consider? Most of what I've covered so far is relevant to group situations too. It's important that in these situations we're trying to maximize consent for everyone as much as possible. Obviously, where there are more people, there are going to be lots of different needs, so finding one way of doing something that will please everyone is going to be difficult. Again, there is a trade-off going on. You might not be able to choose the exact thing you want, so you compromise, but this is because you think it will be a greater reward for doing something in a group. Joining your individual agency with other people leads to collective agency. Collective agency can not only be more fun, but you can also achieve more. Go to the cinema with your mates. Say your best mates are organising going to see a film together. You really want to see Too Thin, Too Crispy, but they all really want to see Pepperoni Wars. Insert your own favourite films here. You're like a +4 about Pepperoni Wars, and they're all like +8, +9 about it. Maybe you'll go along anyway because you value being with them and you know the experience of watching it together will be fun. And hey, maybe you'll like it. There's also the added benefit of being able to say "I told you so" over a milkshake afterwards when Pepperoni Wars turns out to be too long and kind of boring. So perhaps you could say all of this to your friends and say, "Are you sure?" And they'd say, "Are you sure?" And you'd be like, "Yeah." And if it's rubbish, I'll say "I told you so," and they'd say, "Chill." What if you really don't want to see Pepperoni Wars? If you could say to your friend, you could say to your friends, Hey, I really don't want to go see Pepperoni Wars. I'm actually like a -3 about it. So I'd be doing something I don't want to do if I came with you. Perhaps they could say, okay, thanks for letting us know. Let's think of some different options. You could split up, and some of you could watch Too Thin, Too Crispy, and the others could watch Pepperoni Wars. You could then meet up afterwards and chat about it. It can be hard saying what we want in this situation because, as we've discussed, it's difficult to ask someone to meet our needs anyway. If there are a group of people, it could be even more tricky because we might not want to feel like we're letting everyone down. Also, because there are more people around, it might feel a bit riskier to ask for what you want if you're worried about what people think. In this situation, there can be a lot of pressure, and it can be easy to feel like we have no choice. Remember, you're saying no to them and yes to you, and that's important. If you're in a group, it's really important that you're aware of this dynamic because it can be really rubbish to feel like we don't have a choice. It's easy for people to feel left out in groups, and that can be very painful. So perhaps if you're a person in the group who feels confident to talk about it, you could help everyone out by starting the conversation. Put some of the stuff in this chapter into practice. You could say things like, so, how are we all feeling about Pepperoni Wars? Or you could ask everyone to go through the films that they're showing and give their rating from -10 to +10. Even once you're in the queue, you could check that everyone is still feeling okay about the decision. Is everyone excited and enthusiastic? Or are some people looking like they aren't that into the idea anymore? You could say, I noticed that Too Thin, Too Crispy is on at the same time. If anyone wants to see that, they could. Teamwork. There's a very special kind of love that we can get from feeling like we're part of a team. Having a sense of purpose and something that you all want to achieve together can far outweigh the compromises that you have to put up with along the way. This is particularly true when you're doing something in a team because it's possible for everyone to have a specific role for a specific purpose. If you play football or any sport, you might have had a kick about with your mates that was just for fun and didn't matter how good you were. But in competitive football, you would all perform roles within the team so that you could all play more effectively. You could each take on the role that most suits your abilities. Playing in midfield is good for those at passing. A fast runner can play on the wing, and if you have very large hands, you might be good in goal. Everyone could chat about this beforehand by looking at all the different roles and thinking about who might be happiest in each role. In teams or groups, people can take different roles. There's often someone who has a leadership role, someone who mediates between different people, someone who comes up with ideas, and someone who takes action to get things done. This can happen in groups of people quite naturally as people fit into these roles. So, consent here is about dividing up tasks that will help each person in the team to have agency and at the same time having agency as a team. Having both of those things together can feel really great, but only if you're able to have the kinds of consent conversations I've been talking about. Consent in the world. Back when I was boring you about pizza, I said that not everyone has the same freedom to choose, and I'll come to that later in the book. Well, this is that bit. There are lots of reasons why some people find it easier to choose and ask for what they want. It's important that you know about this because everyone has different levels of freedom. Everyone has different amounts of agency. This is where it's all a bit political, and super important. Chapter 10, Gender. Men and women get very different messages about how to live, their agency, choices, and consent. I really hope this changes soon because the idea that men and women are very different and should be treated very differently has been around for hundreds of years. It's not true, and it's really, really bad. Also, male and female aren't the only genders. There are lots of non-binary genders that many people identify with and that all need to be recognised. Anyway, the basic idea is that men are taught by society to be active, tough, carefree, and rational. On the other hand, women are taught by society that they should be whatever men are not. So they are meant to be passive, soft, caring, and emotional. If this sounds like another should story, then you're right. It's bad, right? It's basically saying that men have agency and women do not. Feminist writers, teachers, and activists have been fighting this should story for hundreds of years. 900 years ago, a writer called Hildegard of Bingen said that gender should be seen as different but equal. In the 1940s, Simone de Beauvoir wrote The Second Sex, which talked about how society is structured around men and masculinity. Men get to be the heroes of their own stories, while women are the other characters or the objects in stories. It shocked people when the book came out over 70 years ago, but we'll still have a long way to go before women are treated equally. Learning about feminism from writers like Simone de Beauvoir and Audre Lorde, another important feminist writer, has made lots of people want to raise their kids to be feminists too. But even if we were taught differently about this stuff when we were growing up, we might find that the rest of the world doesn't think the same way. Think about how many films and TV shows are pretty much all about the men, and compare that to how many are about women. See what I mean? Gender feminism and sexism is a whole other book, but it's super important when it comes to consent, particularly if men and women want to do things, which they do. In fact, it's very, very popular. If men are taught that they are supposed to be active, then they are supposed to make the decisions about what they want to do with someone else. If women are taught that they are supposed to be passive, then they have to wait for someone else to make the decisions for them. And when it comes to sex, there is often an extra level of difficulty. Think of the words used to describe men who have lots of sex. Now think of the words used to describe women who have lots of sex. Can you see how men get status for being interested in sex and women get shamed? In a perfect world, this should story would mean that men learn more about how to do consent, like how to ask, how to give options, how to listen to a no. However, sadly, this isn't the case for a lot of men, and many men either intentionally or less intentionally use their power to hurt and abuse women. Of course, men can also be hurt by women and people of other genders. But if you look at the stats, you'll see that many more women are forced to have sex than men. Choosing a pizza is hard enough. Things like negotiating a greeting or having sex are harder. But the different messages that men and women get about freedom and agency make this even harder still. But there's more. Sorry. Chapter 11. How isms make consent harder. We talked about sexism and how that can make it quite difficult when men and women want to do things together. Sexism gives women less agency and less freedom. This is also true of other isms. Next, we'll talk about just a few of these different kinds of isms, but there are many others. This shows that we have a long way to go to make the world a fair and more equal place for everyone. Racism. Racism means that people get less agency and freedom than other people because of their race. Many things in the world are designed by and for white people, restricting people of colour and their freedom to choose. People of colour are often treated less consensually by authorities than white people. For example, black and brown people are often not as safe from harm, abuse, or harassment in public as white people are. Classism. Classism means that people with money and wealth have much more agency and power than people who don't. There are millions of people in the world who don't get to choose what pizza they want or what show to watch because they don't have the financial opportunity to do either of those things. Homo, bi/transphobia. There are also people's experience of homophobia or biphobia, where people who fancy people of the same gender are told that it's going to be really hard for them to find someone to love. Transphobia means that many people who are trans, they don't identify with the gender assigned to them at birth, often face violence and discrimination. Ableism. So, disabled people are often treated as if they aren't going to be able to take part in society on the same level as people who aren't disabled. That's because we have created a society that works better for abled people and gives them more freedom and choice than disabled people. That's what it is to disable somebody. What we all need to do is to smash sexism, racism, classism, homo, bi, transphobia, and ableism. So let's go and make steps to do that. While we do, we also have to remember that we don't all have the same benefits, opportunities, and freedoms because some of us live in crappy societies and communities that deny those things to people because of who they are. So when you're having consent conversations, remember that one person may well have more freedom to make their choices than others. People's experiences of stigma and shame can make it more difficult for them to ask for what they want. Also, remember that many people experience more than one of these isms at a time. The word for this is intersectionality, first used by a feminist called Kimberly Crenshaw. For example, a man might have more power to choose because he is a man, but also less if he is a disabled man. Obviously, when we're having consent conversations, we're talking to individuals. Remember Margie and Rita? Oh, you get that as a pizza joke, right? Margarita? Oh, forget it. Individuals each have their own experiences and stories about how they navigate isms that they face. If someone has been called names, stared at, or threatened in public just for being who they are, then that might affect how confident they feel going out in certain places and at certain times, for instance. As well as identity, people's experiences can also affect how they feel about themselves. Things from our childhood can have an effect on whether we feel able to choose, such as neglect, bullying, or being told bad things like we're unattractive, we're not allowed to be soft, or we can't ask for things. Differences in power. So if one person has grown up with less choice because of their identity or their experiences, what happens if they meet someone who has more choice? How can people choose a pizza, what show to watch, or how to greet each other if one person has more choices available to them than the other? Here are some examples that I've made up. Two are about sex, so I'm sounding the sex klaxon again. Skip over those if you like. I've been with someone for about a year and I think I fancy them. I don't feel very fanciable and everyone fancies her. She also has a lot more friends than I do, so I worry if I tell her, I would lose the friendship. I know I have all the good games, so whenever he comes over, I like to try and give him more choice about what he wants to play. I'm careful not to be patronizing about it, but being a good friend if I give options. He always looks out for me at school and makes me feel included with all his mates, so it's definitely a two-way thing. We have this really close friendship, kind of like a bromance, right? I used to get bullied a lot and found it difficult to trust people. He's never really had that kind of problem, but has also been really kind to me. I can't talk to anyone like I can talk to him. He's introduced me to so many great experiences and things like bands, films, and all his friends, and I always go along with it. I worry that he's going to find other friends because he thinks I'm boring and that I bring nothing to the party. They all come from families who have more money than I do, so sometimes I miss out on doing things with them. It means that I often feel left out and they talk about things they've done together that I wasn't able to do. So sometimes I feel like I can't take part in the group. My partner is well hot and they're really confident about what they want from sex, and I go along with it. It's okay, I guess, but it's not really doing it for me, and I'm not sure how I can bring it up. We have such a great time together. At first, he keeps asking what I liked, which I found a bit tricky, but we've built up so much trust together that he's made it easier for me to say what I like without making me feel ashamed. It's tricky when you're a woman because if you admit you like sex, you're seen as slutty. I never feel that way with him. My disabilities mean that I have to talk about my needs a lot with people. It's something I've had to learn to do over the years, and so now I'm quite confident about it. I've done that with my friends, and now they're all much better at trying to meet my needs. They just really get it, you know? They ask other people about their needs too, which is great. It means that I've taught them about how to empower disabled people. If you think about the relationships you've had with people, maybe you've had a similar experience. Can you think of anything that the other person could have done to make the situation easier? Have you been on the other side of any of these situations yourself with more agency and freedom than someone else you know? How have you handled it? When one person has more freedom and agency than another, they have more power. That creates a difference in power in the relationship, but it might not be obvious when it's happening. So this is why it's important that we're all aware of consent all of the time, and not just when we're thinking about sex. We need to maximize each other's freedom and agency. That means we need to do more asking, more listening, give more options, give people space, notice what's going on for the other person, and sometimes just not doing the thing you want to do. Chapter 12. Empower other with consent. Empower each other with consent. As Toni Morrison, a writer and activist, once said, I tell my students, when you get these jobs that you've all been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. That if you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. This is not just a grab bag candy game. You can see that consent isn't just something that is about us and our relationships with other people. It's also about the world and the structures that we live in. How can we use our choices, freedoms, agency, and power to allow others to have the same choices, freedoms, agency, and power? What can we do in our schools, our neighborhood, our circle of friends, and our family? How can we use our collective agency to make the world fairer, more equal, and more just? This is where activism and politics are really important. It's why people get involved in campaigns like Me Too, Black Lives Matter, and disability rights. It's why people ask their schools to do better when it comes to educating students about relationships and sex. It's why people go on strike for climate change. But it's also important to do these things consensually by asking people what they want and need, offering the help we can, and having ongoing conversations about how to work together. We can all make a start by trying to do more consent on a daily basis with each other and about everything. Learning to give ourselves and each other the most amount of choices, freedom, agency, and power as we can. It's not always easy, but it's always important. And I think we should always try. That's one should story I can get behind. That's pretty much it. So at the end of the book, there are some activities that you can try. So that go along with what we were talking about in the book. And there's a glossary, which I won't go through here. But it's a reference to Too Thin, Too Crispy, my favorite film. And there are some resources. But as I was saying, you can find the resources at my website, bishuk.com. But also there's the Mix. That's a really good website where they have like it's online youth work basically. So they have workers online who can help. That's the mix.org.uk. There's brook.org.uk who have clinics in real life as well as a website. And here again, you can find all the, as I was saying here, if you go to my website on the homepage, I've got a an article that you can find from the homepage which tells you about your local sexual health services. That website's not running anymore. Survivors Trust is really good for anyone who's experienced sexual assault. And that's it. So thank you so much. Please buy it. Also, if you found this useful, if you find my work useful, please think about supporting Bish. So Bish is entirely funded by a Patreon. So it's a crowd-funded sex and relationships education resource. And that's the only thing which is keeping it on the road. That pays for me to work on it, basically. So if you like my work, please consider supporting Bish. Patreon.com/Bish UK. If you go to my website, Bish, there are lots of different ways to support it. bishuk.com/support, where you can support all of my work. Yeah, so buy the book, also support the website. I hope you found this useful. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.